Good morning. This is the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 82. I am JP Dinnell, and as always, I have Lucas with me. But all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear of harm. Proverbs 1:33. This was one of the verses I used to love reading while on deployment. And to be honest, still to this day, it's a great verse and it's a good reminder. For me, while deployed, it was a good reminder of my beliefs, my trust in the Lord and how important that was, and that knowing I was going to heaven if anything was to ever happen to me. I was not afraid of dying, but I want to be very clear. I did not want to die. I had no desire to die, but I was not afraid of dying because I knew where I would end up if that was my day. Now, this mindset, with my faith and the confidence that I had in my training, my teammates, my leadership, helped me stay focused on what I needed to be focused on while overseas. Now, we just watched the movie Warfare that my buddy Ray Mendoza directed. Ray and I actually went through BUD/S together. An incredible human, incredible SEAL. And I will say that Warfare was by far one of the most accurate movies I have ever seen in regards to the warfare I have been experienced to. I'm sorry, that I have experienced and been a part of. It was a phenomenal portrayal of what Ramadi was like in 2006. It was very emotional. Brought back a lot of memories. It's crazy. I could smell Ramadi and I could smell things during that movie. Now, this movie, Warfare, is based off the real-life experiences of Ray and his task unit. His task unit is the task unit that replaced us in Ramadi. Man, it was an emotional movie. It was emotional to watch because of my connection to most of those guys. These were my friends. These were guys that I knew, that I'd gone through training with, that I've experienced life with. The frogmen in that task unit that replaced us were incredibly brave humans, and they still are. I was honored to know those guys, to work alongside those guys at different times, whether it was going through training together to try to become a Navy SEAL, time in the SEAL teams, workups, deployments, working at the training command. I'm extremely honored to know those guys. I will also say that Ray did an incredible job showing how brave the soldiers and Marines are that worked alongside us in Ramadi. Or I guess I should say we worked alongside because we were there to support them. I know I have talked about these brave soldiers and Marines many times, but I cannot give them enough praise for the incredible humans they are and everything that they did for us in that battle. Josh, welcome back, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. Honored to be here.
Yeah, man. Lucas, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm stoked to get to talk about this. It's
a
pretty. I called my dad whenever we were on our way back from the movie theater, and I was like, "Hey, we're about to record an episode about the movie Warfare." And he's like, "Yeah, I really wanted to see that." He's like, "Who'd you go see it with? Who you recording with?" I was like, I sat next to JP in the theater watching it, and he was like, "Don't tell me anything else. I just want to listen to the episode." And I was like, "Sweet, yeah."
I think all three of us probably needed a little decompression time after that movie.
Yeah.
I think we probably all called different people.
Uh-huh.
I know I sat in the parking lot for a while. I was texting Ray Mendoza and Zowie. We'll just keep it as Zowie, as he's referred to in the movie. One of my buddies that went through BUD/S as well with Ray and I. And that guy is a frogman, man. Ray's a frogman. Zowie's a frog. I mean, he is just a frogman's frogman. And those guys are just absolute studs. And I text him and I was like, "Hey, man, phenomenal job. Like, phenomenal job on that movie." And he was like, "Man, that was all Ray. I was just happy I was there to kind of help teach these guys how to cover and move." I'm like, "Well, there's no one better to show them than Zowie. He's just unreal. These guys are unreal, and the guys in that movie that they portrayed were just, I mean, man, he did such a phenomenal job. But I know we're going to jump into a few different things on the movie. Josh, what did you think about the movie?
It was heavy, and I think there was an element of that, knowing somebody that has been there. Like, it's a huge honor knowing the people that I get to that I know have been there, but I mean, we've been friends for a while. I've never sat down and watched a movie like this with you. So to sit beside you at the theater, and it would have been heavy even without that. I think it added an extra layer, but my palms were sweaty. It was very well done from what I could tell.
Yeah.
Even from a pure civilian standpoint, watching, like, even I could tell, like, the great lengths that were taken to make this thing right.
How many? So I'm going to ask both of you guys. So 1 second, I'll ask something real quick. Lucas, what did you think of the movie overall? Just like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely one that I would recommend, but it is not for the faint of heart.
yeah,
it's weird. So we long ago, I've talked about the podcast that used to be on The Reverend and the Reprobate. We did some stuff with people who focused on, like, philosophy and worldview stuff, and so we did a lot of stuff. Particularly, we had partnerships with Marvel, we had partnerships with Star Wars that were part of our agreements, where we would watch their movies and then kind of give them some feedback based on, like, what we saw, and then we would do these whole episodes on the worldview and things that were there, good versus evil, those kinds of things. The way that this movie walks you through what warfare was like, I will say that for me anyway, when I left the theater, I had more questions than I had answers about how I felt about everything that I just saw. And that's odd for me, particularly when, like, artistic analysis is some of the stuff that is, like, that my wheelhouse is built around. Mm-hmm. There was not a lot here as far as, like, trying to find, the underlying things and where's the symbolism and all of that. It's not there. You just get thrown into the middle of this, and it's 95 minutes long, and outside of the first 5 minutes of the movie, you're just stressed the entire time. That's it. So if you do watch it, like, buckle up, because that's all it is.
I feel like one difference, and I'm not a film editor either, but I feel like it was shot in a way that it really, not like you're watching it unfold, like you're sitting there with it, is how I felt. Like you're even with, like, the sound effects and stuff like that, it made you feel like you were actually, I mean, I know not actually there, but you know what I mean.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, because, like I said, I had smells coming back to me from Ramadi.
Yeah.
Smells from Ramadi. And I was just like, I remember going, man, the brain is a crazy thing, because I am smelling the dust. When he was wiping the dust off the bed, I could smell that, because I know what that dirt smells like.
Yeah.
And just, like,
even with buttered popcorn being the overwhelming scent in the theater, you could get that, which is just crazy.
100%.
Yeah.
That, and then, like, I don't want to give away too much of the movie, but, like, I could smell the, like, the gun lube and oil that we use for the machine guns. When they were shooting the machine guns, I could smell it. I could smell the CLP that we used to clean those weapons, and I could smell the lube, and I could smell the gunpowder and the mixture of those, like, together. And then when those rounds were coming into the window, that is 100% what it sounds like to be in that room on the receiving end. It's the most, like, just that sound of just the snaps and the crack. I mean, dude, Ray did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Like, and that's funny you said that, and you said that because my next question I had for you guys was there ever a point where you kind of felt like you were there?
I think we answered that pretty clearly.
Yeah, you're like, 85 minutes?
Right? Like, it was this weird. So Kirsten and I went and watched, on your recommendation, Captain America.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Which was great. We really enjoyed it. We ran out of popcorn and soda about halfway through the movie, which is par for the course for us. Right?
Same.
The three of us did not finish the popcorn. I don't think any of us finished our bottles of water. You got some gummy worms, and I don't even think you opened up the package.
No.
Right? It's the most immersive movie experience that I think I've ever been in.
Yeah.
And but highly recommend watching it in a theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I called Amanda, and she's like, "How was it?" And I knew what she was also asking, like, "How are you?"
Yeah.
Like, I know my wife, and I was like, it was good. I didn't really have the words, like, which is crazy. I couldn't find the words at that time. I told her, I was like, it's definitely a movie you, Aiden, and I need to see, because she was wanting, like, all of us to go see it. But then she was like, no, I think it's good that you guys go see it, and then we can go see it with you later. And, like, to your point, yes, it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
But I also feel like it's a movie every person should watch to understand that.
Yeah.
And to say, oh, this is what war is like.
Yeah.
This is what happens, and here's the effects of war, because it's gnarly and it's nasty, and it's now okay. I know you guys have always understood my perspective when I've said this, and you guys will know, in a second you'll know where I'm going with this, but I want to know if you guys now maybe feel a little more connected to the frustration and anger I have when ignorant people post and say, I can't wait for that stuff to happen here.
Yeah.
Now, does that change things?
It-
Because when people post that, like, oh, we'll be ready, they're not going to try it here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, people don't understand what they're talking about. This
Yeah.
is not going to be a group of people it's not going to be like the old war, like, or if we were invaded or there was enemy attacks on our soil. These are not against guys that are wearing uniforms where it's quickly identified. War is horrible and ugly, and it's evolving, and it's getting nastier.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always get so pissed off when people just have that, like, oh, if it was to happen here, I would. But you don't want that.
No.
You don't want that. And
You've watched Red Dawn too many times.
yeah, I think
Which
Ray
I
did-
love.
Oh yeah,
But-
I think Ray did a phenomenal job letting us feel that
Yeah.
experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, Ray's a stud, man.
I've got a litany of questions about
Yep.
this, and I know so it's all based off of historical events. It's all something that like has been chronicled. Like if you were to go to the Wikipedia page or whatever, it'll talk to you about like this mission, kind of top to bottom. And I'm not personally, and we can have a discussion about this before we dive too much into it. I'm not so worried about spoilers, because I think if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you sort of already know the outcome, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you watch a
Yeah,
World War
maybe.
II movie, like
Yeah.
we won. So like you sort of know the ending already, but there is a certain element to it. There's a lot of nuance to this movie in particular. But to your point about the people that want to welcome this in, one of the things that I think Ray handled really well is the family whose home was used for the Sniper Overwatch. Because from the outside looking in, right, not knowing anything about the family, the way the family's kind of set up, it is a group of innocent bystanders whose home got picked because of its strategic location.
Yep.
And it is really easy in the heat of the moment when you're watching the film to be upset with the SEALs because the way that they have to go into this home, they've got to use it. And it's really easy, iterations removed from it, particularly when we're back home with an ocean and several countries in between us and all kinds of things, to look at that and see, well, this is the reason that we're not, yada, yada. The thing is, though, that this movie really brought to light for me is like, that's what it's like in a war zone.
Yeah.
You don't, if you are a civilian in the middle of a war zone, whether it's at home or abroad, you're in a place where the sides that are warring against one another, that there's a time where whether they're protecting you or whether they are trying to invade you, the precedence that their missions take invades and violates your rights.
Yeah.
And for the people who just think, and we've talked about this a little before, who think that like, oh, you know what, because of the Second Amendment and because of the amount of firearms that are owned by the people in the United States, we've talked a lot about the fact that like there's a difference between owning a firearm and being proficient with a firearm. The amount of guys who have, and I know, I think this was in a Q&A that you were like, I would much rather give firearms to a bunch of guys that are playing airsoft every weekend than to, the bunch of 40-year-old guys who have like this incredible arsenal of stuff but have shot every gun like one time and then it's just like stayed in the safe, because at least those guys have an idea of what to expect. They know how to move. They have some proficiencies that this other group doesn't. And there's a certain amount of like when push comes to stuff, like you don't know what you're going to do. If for whatever reason, if something happened on our soil where the United States became a war zone, I think one of the major factors that people don't understand is that all of the rights that we hold dear will be violated by the enemy in order to gain ground.
And possibly our government.
Well, and that's the next thing is, what in a wartime society, if we're civilians in a war zone, what of those things are necessary?
Yeah.
And when you look at the stuff historically, like that's it. But I do think that Ray did a great job of showing there's a wall that has to be taken down whenever the SEALs go into this home. They use a sledgehammer to take a wall down. They use a sledgehammer to punch a hole in the wall so that they can use for a sniper overwatch. And I don't know what happens after that to this family. There's other horrible things that happen to this house because it becomes a target, which is where the majority of the movie takes place, is in somebody's home, even though you only see them a couple of times.
And the thing with that is there's also like a hard place to like put yourself in that situation.
For sure.
Because, there's a lot of different ways that I can go with what I'm about to say. And it doesn't matter which way I go, because there's going to be people that receive the right way and there's going to be people that receive the wrong way.
Everything is so subjective whenever it comes to making some of these calls.
Yeah, 100%. But that was also part of the tactics that we were using, that the Army was using, that the Marines were using. We would have to seize these houses to be able to conduct sniper overwatches to protect the soldiers that were building these combat outposts in the area. And some of the families were super awesome.
Yeah.
And some of them were not. And the ones that were not, guess who they had connections to?
Yeah, the enemy.
The enemy fighters.
Yeah.
It's like, and then also they were warned about these clearances. They were told, hey, we're going to be doing these clearances well in advance.
Yeah. And
so people had the opportunity to leave. And then some people stayed. And then I know there's going to be some people that heard what I said were like, well, like, why should they leave the house? Why, they should have, they should be able to stay there. I agree, they should, but they also made the choice of staying there knowing that these things were going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, some people didn't have the means to leave. I know that as well. We had families that we experienced that had no way to leave because their vehicle was broken down. And we would have guys help them fix their vehicles so they could leave. And so the Army and Marine Corps did a phenomenal job at trying to help the local populace.
Yeah.
And there were some people that just left because they're able, and there's some that couldn't, that wanted to, and there's some that didn't want to leave, that chose to stay. And there were some people that chose to stay to help the enemy fighters.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't know who's going to be who.
Well, and also
that's the other part of it.
The enemy fighters, it didn't bother them at all to put rounds down into this house where these families were either.
Exactly. They don't care.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think at the beginning of the film, when the SEALs come in and seize the home to use, it's going to be really easy for the average moviegoer who has very little, if any, attachment to anyone who is in the military, let alone was deployed during this time or anything like that. It's going to be really easy to villainize the American troops coming in and doing that, because we live in a society that is built so much around comfort. Mm-hmm. But as the film progresses, you see American soldiers, whenever there are threats to the family, that the American soldiers are laying themselves over the family in order to protect them, that they are doing things, not just like keeping them informed of everything that's going on, but when there is an immediate threat to the family, they're jumping on top of this family, these parents, these kids, to make sure that they're protected. But this is ultimately, when you get to the end of the movie, if what you're thinking of is like, oh, they shouldn't have done that, then you've missed the point of the fact that like this is what a war zone looks like. Whether it's World War I, whether it's World War II, Vietnam, Korea, the stuff that's happening in the Ukraine right now, this is what happens when war is on your doorstep, is this type of thing.
Yeah, and then there's also, which we experienced, is what these enemy fighters were also doing to these innocent families.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was not
doesn't get touched in the film, but yeah.
Which was not, because nobody wants to know about that. Nobody wants to acknowledge that these enemy fighters were doing horrific things. We'll just leave it there. Horrific things.
We should do George Sada's book sometime.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
So to give people who are curious about this, to give them the background that's necessary to really understand what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, I would love to. All right, so what do you guys got?
Yeah, so I took my handy dandy Rocket book in there. No affiliation, but if they want to sponsor us, I'd be happy to accept free products from them.
You're gonna negotiate.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we talked about them coming into to the homes. One of the things that stood out to me in the beginning, Elliot is one of the characters in the movie. He is on the sniper rifle for a really long time. And he's spawning. The first thing that I noticed is that there is a lot of writing that's happening. The first bit of the movie, there's very little that seems to advance the plot, but a lot of setup for like what's actually going on. How much of that portrayal was like y'all's day to day? Like, how much are you writing down and having to communicate with one another about everything that you're seeing, everything that's going on, the different types? Like, some people are talking to air support, some people are talking to the ground support, some people are communicating, with the FOB or the COB, whatever it would be. And then with the conventional forces, and they're all the time, everybody, no matter what position they were in, had a little notepad and they're writing things down. Is that, like, how accurate is that to what was going on in y'all's deployment?
Very accurate. I mean, you have to be, taking down information so that you can relay it properly.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that we weren't doing very well at the beginning of Ramadi.
Yeah.
Because, if you don't train for something, you're not going to do it. And we didn't do that in training often. And then when we recognized when we got over there, just there's so much information to take in, and you have to be able to relay that information properly. And it's like, well, if I'm not remembering everything, or if the information's wrong, or that there's a lot of things that can go bad from not having good information, because your leadership is trying to make decisions based off the information. And in order for people to make good decisions, they need good information. And if you're working with multiple units, they need information, they need updates. What you're doing with that information is you're painting a picture. Mm-hmm. You're painting a picture for people that aren't there, and they're looking up at a screen or a TV on the wall, and they're hearing all the radio chatter, and they're watching drone footage, from however high above, and you're trying to accurately describe what's happening in your world to somebody who's not even close to you. That's going to give you authorization to do things.
Yeah.
And, during the movie, they didn't explain it, but that guy peeking on the phone that many times, that's why he's like, oh, when are you going to stop that?
Yeah.
That was within the rules of engagement to engage, because you knew it was an enemy fighter that was gathering information to pass on for a coordinated attack. 100% of the time that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was within the rules of engagement that the Army gave to us. And they're like, hey, if these guys are doing these things, authorize deadly force. And you're like, cool, check, roger that. But it wasn't just a blanket statement. It's like, hey, here's what they're doing. Here's what it's going to do. Here's why you're authorized deadly force. Boom, 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 boom. Well, in order for you to execute on that thing that you see, that situation you see developing, you have to be able to communicate it back to the higher ups.
Yeah.
So that they know what's going on, why you're taking shots, and you're not just out there killing people just to kill them. Like, that's not what we did. And so you paint the picture for whoever is listening to help make decisions, to help with assets and coordinate different things. There's a lot of moving parts going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the notebooks, that's a real thing.
You talked about the drone thing. There was a moment in the movie where there's guys running around on the roof of the building that the SEALs are in, and the guys that are flying the planes that are looking through the drone footage, they're like, hey, we see you guys on the rooftop. They get the radio in that there's guys on the rooftop, and they're like, that's not us.
Yeah.
You talk about the necessity of communicating in that, because they just see white dots. They don't know who's who, and particularly when a lot of the enemy are wearing civilian-style clothing, you have no idea, who's good, who's neutral, who's bad, any of those things.
They're just going off of heat signatures.
Yeah,
you don't know if that person has a weapon or not.
Right, and the fact that they're in the building, they're like, hey, we see you guys on the rooftop, and they're like, not us.
Nope,
not us.
That to me was a really eye-opening moment that they're like, oh my gosh.
How weird was it for you guys to watch those heat signatures on rooftops, moving from rooftop to rooftop, moving in on their position?
They mentioned, and how close it was. Like, they could pretty much just walk over.
Yeah.
So it was a drone, I assume.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would assume.
Guessing.
As well.
I have a question. Like, it's a two-part, kind of compared to when you were there, and y'all didn't ever have a lot of air support, did you?
One time, I believe we were able to get an airstrike, and that was at the very beginning when we were doing those initial pushes. You know that video that they kick off at the beginning of the muster, where you see that explosion and you hear Seth laughing, and us on the rooftop laughing. That's Seth and myself
awesome,
and a few other guys that were with us. I was like right there next to Seth on that, and that took like almost 45 minutes for that to get approved.
And that's pretty much the only time,
to my recollection.
Yeah. So
I know we didn't get any of them, but the show of force was like the only thing that they could do.
Right.
So what is that? Because that's called for a few times. Will you explain that? What exactly that is?
You saw what happens.
Yeah.
And it's effective with. And
so what is the show of force? Explain to the listener.
It's just show of force. You're showing what we have, and we have these airplanes, and it scares people. They're going to get out of the area. You're trying to inflict a little bit of damage from that.
How high, or I guess how close are they getting?
Pretty close to what that movie showed.
Yeah, so
they're able to get.
They're just a few 100 feet off the ground,
maybe less.
Yeah,
it's unreal.
Yep.
Yeah, we called in for a few show of forces.
Jet that's coming in and just destroying all of the roadways.
Yeah, and anyone on the rooftops, and that's the other thing, and that's why you're doing that. Like, if enemy fighters are up on that rooftop, like, you inflict a little bit of damage to them.
Yeah.
Disorient them, as you saw the effects of Ray and those guys, like that pressure, like it's a real thing.
Yeah, man,
it affects the brain and the body. So to answer your question, we got, I think, one.
Yeah, it was typical to not have that. So
yes, very typical.
You're basically relying on your communication between people and possibly a drone to give you a rough outline of who's where from best they can tell.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is anything worth going down, but I heard some of the routes mentioned, which, talking to you over the years and Echelon Front events, but I heard Route Boiler, Route Spartan, and Route Lakers. Were these real roads there that y'all used, or was that?
Leif and Jocko would have a much better memory of those things. If they would have said Route Michigan,
I was waiting for that
the big one.
Route Michigan, North Stadium Road, which was, but man, I don't recall those names. But the other thing is, there is a possibility that there could have been a changeover.
Yeah.
But that actually, as I say that doesn't make sense, because the Army unit and the Marine Corps units were still there, so they wouldn't just change. Yeah, they would use everything the same. I know we made tweaks to it when we got to Ramadi to help with that. Not like we were the ones, we in the SEAL teams were doing the tweaks. It was like we as a unit, the soldiers and Marines were like, okay, let's clean up some of these battle maps. Let's get some better. Oh, you guys don't have good. Okay, we have access to good printers,
Yeah.
And but yeah, those names of those routes. I mean, I could say they sound familiar, but that might just be because of things you hear over the years. No.
So how real was the fatigue whenever you were on the rifle?
That's a very real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
how long would you go at a time being on the rifle before you needed to like get up, stretch,
hours?
and those kinds of things?
I would push myself to hours, and then you try to get smart, because there's times I push myself to where I remember I was on a rooftop, and you're just up there, and it's off the roof, with that radiating heat, 130 plus degrees, and you're in full kit, and you're laying there up on the rooftop, and it's just exhausting. There's times like me and a few guys were like just going in and out of it, like blacking out on the gun, and then you're trying to, okay, well, that's obviously not smart, that's not healthy, we got to get somebody rotated in there. And there's just times that you're pushing it to the absolute limits, and you're smoked, and then you're just trying to rotate guys through, and you got smarter. Like those guys were smart, because these were things that we passed on, that we were learning real time. Like, hey guys, like, you can only be on a gun for so long, like, because that fatigue is a real thing. It doesn't matter who you are, that fatigue is going to creep in, and you're not going to be accurate at doing your job. Like, that's a very real thing.
I think I've heard you say before, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was times like you would, especially if you were out there for a while, you get used to when the hotter times were, not temperature, but
more enemy movement,
right? And you would plan it and even pull off and take a nap and put somebody else on your gun, even if they weren't.
Yeah, and so we had a good amount of snipers in our task unit, just like the task unit that replaced us did with Ray and Zowie and those guys. But again, that was because wisdom from BTF Tony, who was like, hey, we need a lot of snipers. And that's why we pushed to put guys through sniper course, short sniper courses, just to get guns and kits and qualified. And so the other task unit, as they're going through the workup, they're doing the same thing. They're like, oh, we need guys trained up on sniper rifles and all these things. And myself and the other snipers, we made sure like all of our guys were comfortable and proficient to get on the gun.
Yeah.
And they could get on a gun and make a 300 to 500 yard shot easy. Yeah. I mean, it's the weapon setup, and if you have good fundamentals, which most SEALs do, you're going to, 300 to 500 yard shot. That's, bro, come on. Do that with my pistol. No, I'm just kidding.
Allegedly. Kidding.
Allegedly
kidding.
Plate.
Yeah.
But no, so I think that was a lesson that we learned, was just rotating guys off, and that required talk about an ego check, is when you recognize like, oh, I actually can't stay on this gun the whole time. I can't do my job as the lead sniper. I need to pass it on. I need to delegate that task. And so we had all of our guys that understood the weapon system, and they're proficient in it, and they're comfortable in it. And it was, it was just, that's a perfect example of cover move, is having guys roll onto the rifle while you just go stretch, get a drink of water, go pee in a bottle, right? Like what you saw, that was awesome, bro. That was the funniest thing.
There were a few things in the interactions that were pretty good.
Yeah. It was, the whole pee bottle thing. I was like, yep.
Or when he queued up the comms and they were just like weak.
Yeah, guy doesn't take a shot and everybody's like weak.
Which was the film friendly version, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I leaned over to JP and I was like, this is nothing near the same, but I just had a
interaction.
I had a flashback of being at FTX and Cody or JP coming over if I did something and just being like weak.
Or Jesse.
Yeah.
You do something and Jesse's like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, Dad's mad.
Boy, I messed up.
Yeah. So where are we going with that?
Just being on the rifle.
And, being on the rifle and just rotating guys in. And so, yes, we would do that. We'd rotate guys in. It's like, hey, man, I need to stretch. I need to pee. I need to, take a nap. I'm going to shut it down for a while. And, you get guys on the weapon. And there's also the understanding that guys had, like, hey, if you're seeing something develop and you're not comfortable taking the shot, just wake us up.
Right.
And there's times that guys would do that. And there's other times I'd be woken up from guys taking shots. And you're like, hell yeah, man, let's go.
Well, and I think you kind of have a box built for them. Like you said, like if they're within this range.
Yeah, if you're comfortable taking the shot, like, dude, you want to take 1,000 yard shot? Awesome. Freaking, I hope you don't miss.
Right.
Get out. Yeah, exactly. Like, it was just one of those things where, we're one team, one fight. And, we'd make sure the Marines that we're with and the soldiers we were with, would shoot our weapons. And there was things that I would set that up back at Camp Corregidor. Where we would do shoots from the tops of our rooftops, the the barracks building that we had into base, and we would set up targets, and we'd set up the alleyway, and we'd put like people in place, and we'd have that lane of fire that we could shoot down, and it was to get soldiers and Marines comfortable to be on our weapon systems that were going to be with us.
That's cool.
So they could see the Night Force optics, and they could see the Remington 700 and how that worked, and the 300 Win Mag round, and look at our SR-25, which that was a weapon that Elliot had, which is a 7.62 semi-automatic sniper rifle that the Navy has, and it shoots a 7.62 caliber round, and it's an effective weapon for urban warfare. You can go 20 rounds semi-auto. It's great for when you're patrolling, you're shooting, and most of the time in Ramadi, you're not taking super long shots.
Right.
Now, there are times, and there was times I did as well, and other guys, but for the most part, you're not taking a super long shot that you need that 300 Win Mag round. The 7.62 round and the SR-25 is, going to do the job easy.
Yeah. There was something that really struck me when, we've heard the stories of guys like Michael Monsoor that just have this incredible amount of heroism in a moment. But there's a moment in the movie where a grenade comes in through a very small hole, which kind of sets off everything that it sets everything that the rest of the movie is going to be based off of into action. How often did that kind of thing happen, where you've got a group that you're looking at, you realize that they're massing, you're in communication with other platoons or with other units, other squads that are like, hey, yeah, we're kind of seeing the same thing. The guys are even communicating back and forth. They're seeing the same guys going back and forth between these buildings. Like, what's going on, and then everything pops off because like here comes a grenade. It seems like there are a lot of the stories that you hear from, particularly the war in Iraq, where it was a grenade, it was an RPG, it was something like that really started what would be a firefight to just like stick you guys in the soup. Was that more often the case, or was it small arms fire that really ended up starting it more often than not?
I think it was a pretty unique balance out there of different things. If you can kick off a gunfight with a small explosion that takes out multiple people and confuses them, you're going to have the upper hand. So, an RPG does that, an IED does that, a grenade does that. So, it's just also just as crazy and dangerous to be in the middle of an ambush from, people shooting out of windows, doorways, and elevated positions. Yeah. So in an urban environment, it provides all those things. We were in a situation in Ramadi one time. It was crazy, and I had a Marine with me, and he's my buddy. I'll just call him Nick. Nick, if you're listening, you know who I'm talking about.
What's up, Nick?
Absolute stud. And we had been up on the rooftop, we'd gotten after it, and we were moving downstairs to some of the other rooms, and we had enemy fighters next to us that were shooting up at us, like literally in the building right next to us. And I believe like the guys that were up on the rooftop during that time, they shot a law rocket from the rooftop down into the building, into the front door. And so we're, laying down cover fire. I'm in a sniper rifle. I'm in a sniper position, so I'm scanning. I'm doing stuff on my sniper rifle. But these guys are right next to us, and dude, Nick and I were throwing grenades from our window down into their courtyard, into their doorway that was now open. Oh. And like that's how close it was. And there's a delay on a grenade, and you're not supposed to milk the grenade. However, or cook it, whatever you want. However, like we started milking them after this because it was either myself or Nick. We threw the grenade down there, and someone was down there and grabbed it and threw it back up at our window.
Oh no!
And it came up to our window and exploded window level. And we both hit the deck when it went off. And he had a piece of that grenade rip right through his tricep. Oh. Like just if you were to take your tricep and just take a half face blade and just nick it. Just push it in and then slice the back. Ugh. It was, And, bro, he's such a stud. He hid that from his leadership because he didn't want to be pulled from working with us.
Yeah.
That's how brave these guys were. Like Studs. That. Like these are the guys that I got to work alongside. So
they're like, patch it up. I'm good.
Yeah. No, Nick was like, he patched it up on target, and he was like, "Don't say anything." I'm like,
Yeah, I'm
anything."
not gonna tell.
I nicked the wall.
Yeah. Seth noticed. He was like, "There's blood on his arm." Anyways,
There's
but
red
that
on
was a pretty unique. That was one of many, right? That was like that. And so there's times where, it's just like, all right, next grenade I'm throwing down there. It's like, pull pin 1,000, 2,000, throw it out, and like you're just hoping that it doesn't get thrown back up into the window. And we were so lucky it didn't come into our room.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. So
Go ahead, Josh.
I didn't want to shift you off, but since we're talking about that, how normal was it for them to start the attack like it was portrayed in the movie? It was almost like a call to arms, basically.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure sometimes it didn't always, but was it very common for them to just...
Yeah, because there's 2 Iraqi soldiers that are portrayed in the movie, and they alert the SEALs at one point where they hear something and they're going to attack us.
Well, because they would use those intercom systems in the mosques as a form of communication.
Right.
They would take over the mosques and use them for purposes that were not intended to be for.
Right.
And they had complete control over that region, doing horrific things. So if anybody in the mosque didn't help or allow them to do stuff, then they would torture and murder every single one of those people in there.
Yeah.
And so they would come in and just do literally whatever they wanted. So they were using the mosques as ways to communicate. And that's when when those Iraqi soldiers said those things, we would often have the Iraqis, you could hear, things happening, and they would try to design it to be confused as a call to prayer time. But then as you're hearing it, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And the other indicator is as you guys watch, the streets clear out.
Yeah.
The dogs start barking and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And it's, but the big indicator is when the streets clear out.
Yeah.
Because they know what's getting ready to happen.
Right. So if you're there, you know what they're there for.
Exactly. And so that's the other part that we didn't dive into earlier. It's you can feel bad for the family where their house got taken over, but it's also you guys know what's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking, trust me, they were in a horrible situation. These Iraqi families were in a position that is just unthinkable. And it's horrific. It's really horrific what they had to endure from those enemy fighters.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy.
And that's why I go back to the World War II thing. If you've read any of the biographical information that's coming out of, or that came out of the Western Front in particular, in the Pacific it was almost like it was a completely different war. But on the Western Front in particular, you look at Northern France, you look at some of the things that happened in and around the UK and in Germany. If you've seen Band of Brothers, or if you saw Masters of the Air, you actually kind of get a glimpse into this. And Audie Murphy talks about it a lot in his book To Hell and Back, of them going into places in northern France after Normandy where the people have had French soldiers who have occupied their homes, and then they have had German soldiers who have occupied their homes. And then as the German soldiers are getting pushed back, now these American soldiers are occupying their homes. And this is the third army that they've had there, and they've got no supplies. They've got nothing. And whenever they go in, the soldiers, the homeowners are like, listen, please don't touch my daughters. And, we'll give you whatever we have. We hope that you win. But if something happens, we're going to alert you to run out, because if they find you, then it puts us at risk. So, do your best to lay low. And the amount of fatigue that those families have from being back and forth from all of this is insane. It's easy for us as people in a Western culture to look at the folks that are in Northern France who we maybe share some heritage and some lineage with and say, well, yeah, that's awful that happened to them. Detached in a Near Eastern or a Middle Eastern viewpoint with a culture that we have very little in common with, where we have very little shared ancestry, it's much easier for us to look at them culturally in a completely different light than we do people that we have a much more shared culture with. And so I think it's really important to highlight that this is just something that happens in warfare. There's a moment in this, a guy gets wounded. They're doing a casualty evacuation or a CASVAC.
Yep, same thing.
And an IED goes off while they're trying to evacuate. This is a scenario that seems really odd in a number of ways. And I'm not sure when you're watching the movie what is intended to highlight maybe some things that went awry with a mission? Was everything executed perfectly, or were there some things that they were showing like, hey, for instance, a smoke gets thrown out, but it's really shallow. It doesn't go out. It doesn't seem to me, right, like it goes out very far, like it's as effective as it could have been. Were those things that they were showing to kind of highlight, like, here's something that went wrong, or this is what happened in this situation? Or was that something that was like perfectly executed, and that's just kind of how those situations play out?
The smoke could have...
These like the big questions that I've got coming out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that smoke can be used for a couple different things. And, I mean, I'd have to, like, confirm with Ray, but the way I took it as... they're popping smoke to confirm their location.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
And so it didn't matter. And so it didn't matter where the smoke's location was, as long as it was in their courtyard right
somewhere
there.
by that
Yeah,
door.
somewhere near where they were at.
Hey, we're
Yeah.
marking our popping smoke, so that they can mark their location.
So it wasn't about concealment. It's more about location.
I think at
Well,
that
and-
time,
yeah,
and
that's
that's
what
what
they were talking about,
we
yeah.
would use smoke to confirm our location.
Right.
And all right, hey, popping smoke. And there's times like I have videos, I think, on one of my computers of just from like cameras that we had on our gear, guys' helmet cams, and like there was times like you could hear us like, hey, popping smoke, and we'd throw smoke out in the middle of the street so that these Bradley fighting vehicles knew exactly where to pull up. It's
Right.
like, hey, all right, hey, I see red smoke, and they would pull up right in front of that gate. And so
Yeah.
that's where they knew. And the smoke can cover and, provide a little bit of cover. Concealment, right?
Right.
For you, but at that moment, I don't think that's what they were trying to do. I think it's more of just, hey, we're just marking our location.
Yeah.
And they know that there's, I mean, bro, they know that there's enemy fighters on rooftops and, up in windows and elevated positions. So you're not going to go out there until those Bradley fighting vehicles are in position. And
Seeing the Bradley fighting vehicles in action was pretty awesome. I've got written in my notes here, I want to drive a Bradley fighting vehicle. It would be so much fun.
that and an M1 Abram battle tank.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Bro, we there was just numerous times we'd call in for Bradley's fighting vehicles to help us get out of there. M1 Abram battle tanks, and they'd come, in front of your position, and you're marking the enemy's location through a tracer rounds, and then you see the turret like moving towards that building. You're like, yes, yes. I would always joke and be like, it sounds like angels singing, because like when that turret is moving, and then just and that tank is just leveling a building. Like you guys, that was video from the Bradley fighting vehicles. And imagine the damage the tanks would do.
Yeah. Taking walls down.
Bro,
well, we got a little taste of that in the movie because he shifts his focus of fire, and you hear it to the other side of the street. And you're like, oh yeah,
yeah. I think all of us when that happened, we're like, yes.
Yeah. I've got a piggybacking off that. I have a 2-part question. When they're doing that Kazovac, the entire team went out. Was that normal? Is that just for security, just to have as much?
Which one, the first or second?
The first, before it got IED'd.
Yeah. I mean, because you need to set security. Yeah, absolutely.
I assume that, but I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, everyone's going to go out. They're going to set security, and I mean, that's what we would do for sure.
That scene in particular was something that struck me, is that like the precision timing has to be like so on point, obviously, which is why you guys drill and train and do so many things. How easy, because it seems like with the Bradley fighting vehicles in particular, that ramp goes up or down, and once it starts that motion, it's got to complete it. Like it doesn't seem like that they can like stop halfway. And so I'm wondering how often is it that somebody is in a situation where like, hey, you know what? I was part of a Kazovac, and we got the guy situated. The ramp started coming up, and now I'm stuck. They're not going to lower the ramp back down so that one guy can, get off. It's not like the kid who missed his bus stop and the bus
Like
driver
when Ray was like, "Hey, I'm stuck in here."
Yeah, like
because he got him on there and he got stuck in there.
Yeah, how often did those kinds of things happen, and what was protocol then? Because now the team's working a man down. How do you?
Yeah, I think at that
operate
situation,
like that?
because they had that other, Overwatch position moved to their position, they had enough guys to stay there until nightfall or until another unit came in, you know. But yeah, it's hard. That's a hard situation because once it's like, hey, we got to close these doors because hey, we're receiving fire.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. Like that door's down, there's a legitimate threat, and that would always be like the most unnerving thing was loading into the Bradley fighting vehicles, and that door open and there's a gunfight going on the outside. Any one round that goes in there is going to ricochet all around there.
Yeah, it's going to hurt multiple guys later.
Yeah, and I think that happened to units. It didn't happen to any of ours, I don't think. At least I don't recall.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can say for my guys, like that never happened. But it's a very, very inherent risk.
Yeah, and that seems like it would be super. You know, on the one hand, like you did your job, you got the guy into the vehicle, you've got your wounded teammate out of there. But on the other hand, there's got to be so much stress and guilt and stuff associated with the like, now I'm being taken out of the battle space because I did my job and we had to rush to get out of there to make sure that we weren't putting other people's lives at risk.
Yeah, but also just as equally important is escorting your guys.
Yeah,
and making sure your guys are getting the treatment they needed. Because now, hey, who's gonna better pass on the information about what happened
than the guy that was right there the whole time?
Right.
Yeah.
Than guys that were actually there with them. So there's, I mean, yeah, it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. You talked a little bit in a previous episode about a training that you guys did on packing wounds. Mm-hmm. I forget what the name of the training was, but it was something where you guys dealt with like open wounds, lacerations,
live tissue,
live tissue training, and those kind of things. You get to see a little bit of that implemented here, and in particular, it's such an important thing for the plot of this movie because the medic gets wounded and kind of taken out for a little bit. How much of that was something that you guys dealt with on a regular basis as the non-medic? You guys weren't the corpsmen, or not all of you were corpsmen, right? Yeah. So like, how often were you guys having to help out with those types of things, whether it be other guys in the SEAL platoon or some of the conventional forces that you worked with, where you're like, hey, you know what, we got to take care of this. The medic's dealing with somebody else. We got to know how to do this.
I would say often. I mean, the story I share at the muster, occasionally, if it ties in properly or to kind of what we're diving into, is when I pulled Gunny out of the street, is I immediately started working aid on him, and because our corpsman was dealing with a couple other guys that were wounded, and then once he recognized that Gunny was a much higher priority, he shifted focus and he came over and took over. But yeah, that training was critical. And there was when Cowie was shot and Mikey and Benny were dragging him out of the street, Benny was the one administering aid to him, medical aid to him. There wasn't a corpsman. There was no medic. It was Benny, while Mikey stood in front of them. Like an archangel protecting them. And just like engaging multiple enemy fighters that were trying to move on in their position while we're trying to run to their position through the streets. It was Benny that was doing all those medical things. When Mikey jumped on a grenade and absorbed the blast, the other two guys that were laying right next to him, they were blown up as well. And so they had fragment in their legs and their body, and they were messed up. And so they were, self-aid, buddy aid. You're administering aid to yourself, then you're trying to take care of your buddy, and then, Seth and those guys like moving to their position, and it's just like crazy, and so it was often, and that's why our medics were so good at like giving us training and continuational training, and, we would talk about stuff, we would practice stuff all the time. And like our medic, I mean, he is just one of my favorite humans, and I know he doesn't want me to say his name, even though he's been out, like, and out of respect for him, I won't, but I mean, he was a phenomenal medic, and he made sure that we knew what we needed to do, and he took care of us, and he's a great human.
What I guess one of the other questions I've got is, there's this check that the guys do on each other several times where they're kind of patting each other down. I forget what they call it.
Blood check?
Sweeping for blood.
Yeah. How often did you, like when you're doing the sweep, did you find a wound that a guy didn't know about? whether it's just a scratch, maybe, they caught some shrapnel or things like that. How often did that happen where you actually found something that a guy didn't know that he'd been hit?
I never did. So
Okay.
I never did a lot of those sweeps. So I can't answer that.
Okay.
Like
Well, I mean, if you never found one, then 0%.
Yeah, it would be 0. But I know there was some guys that did sweeps that found stuff that guys didn't realize that they had going on because of adrenaline or whatever else was happening. But I did not ever deal with that. The guys that I helped with aid, it was very apparent, and it was like, you're just trying to apply pressure, or clean something up. So I did not ever.
I do think that it's interesting. The guys talk about you hear veterans, just specifically, if I can use my words, specifically combat vets that have been hit that say, you know what, I didn't even know that I was hit until I slowed down, or until we got back to base, or until we had evac'd or whatever. Because their adrenaline is going so much. And there are a lot of guys that liken their wounds that they got. They were like, you know what? I just thought I was experiencing muscle fatigue because of the amount of gear and the loadout and stuff that we had. I had no idea that I had, a part of a grenade sticking out of my arm until somebody was like, hey, there's a thing there. Can I get it out? Or let's call the medic, right?
Like my buddy Nick I was talking about, he didn't notice it right away.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't like, like
right.
Now in the movie there's some screaming for rightful reasons that you will understand when you watch the movie.
Yeah.
That brought Rob Jones's story to life for me a little bit more. Rob talks about when we had him on that he remembers kind of coming to after he found the IED, and he was already screaming that. Like he does not remember the getting hit. He doesn't remember flying through the air. Just kind of remembers being on his back. And the first memory he has after it blowing up is hearing himself scream. That he didn't have any control over it at all. And the movie does a phenomenal job, I think, of portraying that exactly.
Yeah.
And then some of the conversations that the guys have around. Some of the wounded guys that need to be evac'd sound really similar to like having heard Rob's story about them saying like, leave me, don't touch me, don't do anything else to me. Like all of that, it's those same things. They're like, we've got to move. And he's like, don't touch me. And they're like, no, you have to, you're in danger. You've got to move.
Yeah.
And thinking about Rob and hearing Rob's story and then having the opportunity to interview him, that was one of those things too that really stuck with me because they did such an amazing job of portraying that because it matches up with, the experience of somebody we know that had been through something similar so well.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It was creepy.
The body is crazy.
Yeah.
The body's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
What was there anything, and I don't know if you had this planned already, but was there anything that stuck out to you that, a civilian such as myself might have missed or...
Yeah, so I thought they did a really good job with the radio chatter.
Okay.
I love how when he just at one point just unplugs it. And then he's like trying to key up and he's like, oh, shoot. The radio chatter was awesome. And the radio, I guess we call it etiquette, right? Of like
Etiquette.
Yeah, thank you. Radio etiquette of how you talk on the radio. They did a phenomenal job. Spot on.
I like to hear those things. It's something I
those,
wouldn't know. So.
And honestly, like those Marines in the movie that they were replicating, it was, those Marines are freaking badasses, man. They are badasses. The soldiers were badasses. Like, and I thought they did a great job of like those Marines. It's like, hey, one team, one fight, man. And there's also going to be a lot of people that are going to try to say the movie was inaccurate because it was a group of SEALs wearing Army Digi-Cami uniforms, but that's what we wore out of respect for the Army because we were working with them.
I was prepped for that one already.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I even like prepped myself for any ignorant comments in the movie theater where I was just going to ignore everything because I was waiting for that.
What, are they in the Army now?
Yeah, exactly. But I thought they did a really good job with the radios, the gear, man. That gear, I was like, and I think I've showed you guys some pictures. Mm-hmm. I have some of that gear still.
Yeah.
Like that soft wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's in my garage. And I thought there was a good representation of the gear that we had, the tactics. I mean, you had my buddy Zowie working on that. Like, there's no one better to teach you those things. Like, nobody better. And as you could see, they were shooting and moving and covering moving like unreal.
Yeah.
It was sexy, man.
It was really cool because in the lead up to the movie, that's one of the big things. Like, there's been a few trailers that have been shown, but like one of the videos about this movie that's gotten the most play is the guys who were portraying the task unit that went through a 3-week like mini buds kind of thing, where they didn't call it that. They basically like went through a tactic training, but they did things to them in order to try to build camaraderie between the guys.
Good.
And they mentioned they're like, there are some things we're not going to tell you that they did to us because it was necessary for us to like understand like what these guys went through, even though it was only a 3-week course. They said at the beginning they had no clue, and even some of those guys, Will Poulter in particular, who plays the little platoon commander for the group that you're following, he's been in war movies before, and he was like, this was a different animal.
Yeah, because you had actual war heroes.
Right.
Yeah.
Not
walking
just
you through it.
But when I say war heroes, I mean that. Ray Mendoza is a war hero. Zowie is a war hero. The other guys that I know that they had access to that came and helped are war heroes. You know, and so that's the difference.
Yeah.
Is you have guys that have actually done those things, and they're showing them how to do them. And
They do show some clips at the end of the movie where they're showing them how to do them. It's pretty freaking cool.
bro, and to have Elliot there,
Yeah.
could
dude.
you imagine?
Yep.
What do you think the stress was of that actor to play Elliot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he probably
So
came
he-
like after all his scenes were shot.
Maybe. But you know, Elliot's
Maybe
SEAL.
not.
I think I've talked about him on here before.
We need to get him on.
Well, I was just going to say he only communicates through an iPad. He can't talk.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I was saying. I think we've talked about him on here, and I've mentioned that because of that trauma from that explosion, and then all the surgeries he lost the ability to speak.
Wow.
So he's still like brain function in regards to his thoughts, his intelligence is still where it was. He just cannot speak words.
Yeah.
And he has to use an iPad to communicate too. That's why he had that on at the very end, and he, you know, had his little hand salute to Ray. Like that's how he says hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so funny, man. There are times I have some. I'll find some photos of him and I at something, and it was funny. He was sitting there, and he was trying to get his can of dip out, and I was just sitting there watch. And I mean, dude, he is limited on what he can do. Mm-hmm. And I was just like watching and letting him struggle a little bit, and then he gets on his iPad and he like types a message. He's talking crap to me for not helping him.
Thanks a lot,
I was
man.
just sitting there and finally grabbed his can and
Yeah.
I pack the dip and I open it and give it to him. And he's
That's
like,
awesome.
you
Don't
know,
help me or anything.
Yeah, it was, dude. He is hilarious, dude. Leif Babin and I will talk about some of the text messages that we get from Elliot Miller, bro. Unreal.
Yeah.
Just like where you're like, oh my gosh, like the dude's sense of humor is just incredible.
That's awesome, man. We I don't know that we've touched on this, but I do think it's worth noting. This is the group that followed y'all. Like this is not very long after Task Unit Bruiser has come home.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of the group that followed you up. And if you put, I mean, it shows the date at the very beginning that it's, November 19th, 2006.
Yep.
And so if you read Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that like this is the group that follows y'all up. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, you're back home, you're kind of figuring out, everybody in TU Bruiser is figuring out what they're going to do next. How much of this did y'all know about, and how quickly did you know about this? Like,
Instant.
Yeah.
Like when it happened, it's getting passed on.
So are y'all finding out like as it's happening? Are you keeping up with it? Or are you finding out in the after
not
reports?
Us, but there were people in San Diego in our community that as it was happening, they were getting reports. I
Real
believe
time. Yeah.
because that's how we would operate stuff back at the command. They say, like there's Warcom is connected to all those things, you know, and so that our command's at. And so there is people that when it's going down, they have access to all the same information and footage and videos and comms that they had overseas, I believe, because it was very quick that we learned about all those things, and guys were being activated and not activated to go deploy, but like people were being called and activated to like start with the process of helping with whatever we needed to help with at the command. The command's like ability from our leadership to be able to facilitate all those things is, bro, it's
pretty
unreal.
stellar.
Yeah.
So as you're finding out about this, you know, and now hearing, you know, you got connections to these guys, you've been to buds with some of these guys, who knows what information you're getting and how quickly you're getting it. What's going through the mind of, what would this be, 23, 24-year-old JP, who's just, or maybe 22, 23-year-old
No, I'm
JP?
still 23.
Yeah. You've just come back from this war zone. Your friends have gone into it. You hear that this happens. How are you processing that information?
A lot of guilt, because I had the ability to talk with most of those guys before they pushed over there. And because we came home, there was, you know, I escorted Mikey's body home, right? And so that was at the very end. So there hadn't been the turnover yet. And so I was, myself and the guys that escorted Mikey's body home went and talked to the other task units that were getting ready to deploy. And, you know, it's just like, man, like, one, why didn't I stay? You know, that's the thing that I always struggle with is like, man, I escorted Mikey's body home, which is very important. But then there's also like, hey, I should have gone back out there. Like my girlfriend at the time had just broken up with me like the day before I found out Mikey died. You know, because I cut my finger, almost lost my finger. They had emergency surgery on that. So I got pulled out for emergency surgery. I go have that surgery. I'm back at the regular base. Most of the guys are still at Camp Corregidor. We're trying to figure out what's happening. And because I had that surgery, they're not letting me go back there to go out on those operations.
Yeah.
And which I wish I would have fought for more when, you know, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like I've talked about this with Jocko and, you know, Seth when he's still alive, and Leif and other guys multiple times. I was just so pissed that I didn't get to go back, and I should have just gone back out there. Hitchhike, no, just kidding. You know, somehow like it's like instead of going back to the main base, I should have, you know, there's a lot of things, but you know, you can't play that game.
Right.
But I did. I played that game for a long time. And so yeah, and my girlfriend at the time broke up with me when I was back at the normal base when I called her. And, you know, and so that happened, and then I lost Mikey. Or I think I know we lost Mikey, and then I called her, and then she broke up with me, and I was just like, oh.
It's a lot of loss in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember which order it was in. Honestly, I don't remember if she broke with me and I found out about Mikey, or I think it was... Yeah, I don't recall, man. I just don't recall. But yeah, that was a lot to process. And so I was like, bro, I had no reason to be back in San Diego. Like, I should have just gone back out with the guys. Like that's what I should have done. And so there was a lot of that guilt that I think myself, I don't think about myself, that I know myself felt, but I think some of the other guys definitely felt that as well, because I mean, you're there, you're in it, you know, all these little things. And yes, while you do a good job at passing things on, like there's, hey, what slipped through the cracks? Like, hey, could I have done something different to prevent that because of the experience? I don't know, you know, and that's a game I played for a long time.
Yeah.
And I tried to seek answers at the bottom of a bottle of Jameson and never had the answers. And so, cool, I'm going to try out the next night. Nope, going to try it out the next night. And that game led to, just for me, a lot of excess drinking, you know, and, you know, just running wild, which is never the answer. So, yeah, it's hard when you hear those things.
When you have the opportunity to meet back up with these guys, after, something like this happens, they come home from deployment and y'all are able to get together, whether it's back in new units or whether it's just at a, welcome home party, whatever it is. What's it like discussing these types of things, or do you even bring it up?
Oh no, it's all talked about. It's all discussed. It's debriefed. After action reports, guys are going around in the different training commands and saying, "Hey, this is what the mission was like. Here's what we did wrong. Here's what we learned. Here's things that we need to change to training, tweak the training." We were feeding information back constantly back to the strand.
Yeah.
And Steve Ward, who is an echelon front instructor, that was his task unit that this movie is based around. Elliot Miller was one of his guys, man. Ray Mendoza, Zowie, those guys, those were his guys.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's heartbreaking, to endure that. And so the whole time Steve Ward and those guys are training to get ready for Ramadi, we're feeding information back from the missions of what's going on, how we're doing things, what went wrong, what went well, what do we learn. That's why debriefs are absolutely critical. Like, people should be debriefing all the time. That's what we teach at Echelon Front. Debriefs. Getting alignment with your people and debriefing. I mean, a debrief is a tool that's only going to facilitate and expedite your growth.
Right.
Debriefs facilitate and expedite growth. And we were doing that. They were doing that. When they came back, they did it. We would talk about it. And, Steve Ward and Zowie and a handful of those guys, they came to the training command. So there's a handful of us that went there after Ramadi. A handful of them came out after Ramadi, and they made the training better. That's why I was talking about my buddy Zowie. Like, bro, that dude is a freaking frogman.
Yeah.
And he is just an incredible human. So,
do you guys talk about it though? Like when it's, the unofficial off the record stuff.
Oh yeah.
And how much we know so much more about the need to process with others, right? When you're talking about these types of things that have to do with loss, to kind of, if you're comfortable kind of peeling back a little bit, what do those conversations look like between y'all? Do you know, like, when a guy needs, help beyond what, you can do just listening, or is there something where, they're like, hey, we don't want to talk about it, and it's kind of just, we don't, or do you encourage them like, hey, you know what? I went through the same thing. It's better for us to talk about it, kind of deal. Or does it just depend?
I hate giving that answer. It just depends, but it's kind of one of those situations where it's going to be dependent upon the person, the environment that you're currently in, the environment that they went through, your relationship. I mean, I recently had a phone call with a buddy who, I was working through some stuff, and it's just like straight up like, I don't want anybody to know these things. And I'm like, bro, it's hard for you to get help. It's hard for me to help if you're saying I can't do these things, I can't make phone calls, and I can't do these things. But okay, cool. Like, well, hey, here's what I do. And then there's also the aspect of like, all right, cool. You might be pissed at me, but I'm calling somebody, or I'm gonna reach out and, okay, cool. You can be mad at me later, but we'll work through this stuff. And so I think there's that element, and I know the thing it comes down to every single time is your relationship with the person. And that's why having a relationship with the men and women that you work with, that you work for, is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. And that was, a big thing. We have a very strong community that's, very strong in the SEAL teams, and the camaraderie that we have is very strong. And so I think we have that to our advantage when it comes, because we're small groups and we go through so many things together. You have the ability just to talk through things, and like you even saw in the movie, like that guy's jacked up and Ray's like, bro, leave him alone. The guy's like, come on, man, you're a frogman, blah, blah, blah. There is also that's a real thing when guys aren't doing well and they're struggling, and you're just like,
you kick their wounded leg.
You're like, you'll be all right, but it's like, hey, man, you're a frogman.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Get out of this. And again, that comes down to the relationship that you have with the people. And talking through things is so helpful. I mean, you have to talk through things, because if not, you're just holding on to those things and they don't go away. And you can either identify it and talk about it, address it, work through it, and find a way to, get rid of that, or it can sit and it's going to fester. And now maybe it doesn't fester. Maybe it just sits for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Eventually, these are things that will come to light that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
And talking about it in an environment that you're comfortable with the people is always a beneficial thing. And that's what we had in the SEAL teams.
There is one question in relationship to the scenario you were just talking about that cracked me up. If you are an echelon front listener, you've heard it at the muster, you've heard it on Jocko's podcast, you've heard it here, and that is the 3-letter BTF, right? So most of the time I think people associate that with BTF Tony. Is that something that he came up with? Because it's something that is said in the movie. There's a guy that's wounded, he's being moved, he doesn't want to be moved, and the guy, there's another SEAL slaps him on the chest, he's like, all right, time to BTF, and then they pick him up and start moving him.
It stands for Big Tough Frog Man.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tony invented
coined that phrase. Yeah.
He definitely capitalized on that. Task Unit Bruiser, I'll tell you that. BTF, 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 BTF. I remember we're out in the middle of the desert, and it's hot, man. Like 100 plus degrees in the morning before we're like starting the heat of the day training. Tony's a psychopath in the best way possible. I mean that as a term of endearment. Like when I have a call from Tony coming through, I'm like, all right, how much time do I got? And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, how much time do I have to be able to dive into some stuff with BTF Tony? And anyway, so we're in the desert doing our land warfare training, and guys are all sitting around like for a water break, and Tony is drinking black coffee out of his canteen.
My man.
Everyone else is trying to drink water to stay hydrated. And I just remember him drinking, him like pouring the coffee, because it's coffee, because he's pouring it into his little coffee like canteen mug, and he's drinking that. And I'm just like,
it's not going to get cold.
Fair.
And I'm like just looking at him like, you're not a normal human. You're not. I just remember looking at
something
him,
wrong with you,
and he must have known what I was thinking, because he's sitting at me. He's like, "You want a drink?" I'm like, "No, I do not want to drink black coffee when it's hot in the middle of the desert." I'm just sitting there. I'm like, "No, I'm good, Chief." And he's like, he says something along the lines of like, y'all are like, he's like making fun of us for being weak and needing water.
Yeah.
You're weak humans for needing water.
Water makes you weak.
And then he proceeds to pull out a can of Copenhagen and put in just packing it out, and puts in the biggest, like, where I remember watching him put this dip in, like I was nauseous. My mouth started watering, and I was like just the biggest lipper of Copenhagen long cut, and then starts sipping on his coffee, and I'm like, you're gonna die. I'm just, again,
the enemy's not even gonna get a chance.
Again, I'm a one pump chump, meaning I have one workup, one deployment under my belt. I'm a nobody still, and I'm like one of the younger guys, right? And I'm the most junior ranking guy, and I'm looking over at this psychopath that I love. That, by the way, I love Tony, and I'm just like, what is wrong? Wow. His nickname was the Nylander because of how much time he spent out in Nyland, which was our training facility out in the desert warfare training facility. They nicknamed him the Nylander.
He's just out there drinking black coffee every day.
Oh, just a different
in
human.
Death Valley.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, bring it on.
I'm saying, and I don't want any of that. None of that was negative towards Tony. It was like that. I was like, I love this guy.
Yeah. He sounds freaking awesome.
Yep. If he's out in 130 degree weather, wearing his wool sweater, drinking his coffee, reading his stories, it's like, hey, nobody's gonna interrupt Big Tony.
Yeah.
BTF Tony.
Yeah, BTF Tony.
That's
when
amazing.
He's on Jocko's podcast,
he's hysterical.
Well, if you watch on YouTube, you see he's literally drinking beers the whole time.
I'll have to watch one now.
Watch it on YouTube. He's literally
just been like listening to all of
it. Watch one of. We'll find it later and we'll watch it after the episode.
Okay.
So my buddy Nick, I was talking about.
Yeah.
he texts me back, and he goes, "Not the same riding around without y'all." I mean, you can watch. We can't say what you're watching though.
Yeah. Dude, what a freaking stud. It's pretty cool to see how so many of the guys that you were serving with, and just the incredible things that they've gone on to do.
I mean,
right? Absolute monsters in every category whenever it comes to how measured they are with their lives, the things that they're doing moving forward. And it's so encouraging to see that, because I think a lot of times we get the idea that particularly those of us who hear on the NCC side, right? We hear like the little jabs that like the Air Force and the Navy and the Army and the Marines and stuff take at one another. And yet when we look at the way that, they're portrayed in the movie Warfare, the amount of coordination that y'all had with one another, the amount of support that y'all were ready and willing to give each other in order to accomplish the mission, the idea of one team, one fight is so prevalent. And then, on this end of it, seeing how that wasn't something that stopped whenever you came home. The friendships that go across the branches have been maintained. The way that you're supporting each other, the way that you encourage one another and see each other's successes and celebrate them is such an amazing thing. And I think it's something that, I'm learning a lot from, and in celebrating and learning to celebrate and encourage the victories and the people that I've got in my circle, man. It's cool to see guys like Nick.
Yeah.
Out there
Awesome.
still getting after it and doing cool stuff, man.
Yeah, dude, that short little video clip, I'm like,
Same.
I want to go. Yep. I want to go join.
I want to go to there.
Into the fray.
Yeah, baby.
It's funny. Ray Mendoza just texted me back.
Hi, Ray.
Hello, Ray.
We've just been talking about it. Your ears must be burning. By the way, his mustache way better in the stuff at the end of the film that shows the seasoned Ray Mendoza director versus the picture of Ray Mendoza at like 19 that gets put up there.
So it's funny, that picture of him
has come in quite well.
He was not 19. He went through BUDS in his late 20s.
Really?
He had gone through BUDS once previously, made it to about a week or two away from graduation, and got dropped from training.
No way.
Yep. He is one of the few situations, because this was old school, where if the instructors didn't like you, they could literally just get rid of you. Whoa. And there was an instructor that did not like Ray Mendoza, his first time going through BUDS, and made some thing and said that he failed his the machine gun. One of the tests that we'd have to do where you take apart the machine gun and put it back together and everything, and they failed him on that, and he got dropped from training, which is crazy.
Asinine.
Yep, that's a good word.
Thank you.
That's a good word. And
We'll go with that
I feel like it communicated the sentiment properly.
Bro, you nailed that one spot on. And so when I was going through BUDS, Ray was one of those older guys that I really looked up to, that I leaned into, who gave me, one of my nicknames when I was going through training. And he's just a big brother. He was just like he was like that to everybody. And I remember one time, it's at the very beginning of BUDS, and I'm like standing next to him and a few other guys, and somebody came up to him and like said, "Hey, you need to go do this." And he looks to me and he goes, "Hey, you need to go do this." And I remember going, "They just told you to do it." And he goes, "Bro, I'm in the Navy. I don't do, I delegate." And I was like, "Roger that, petty officer," because he was a petty officer. And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, what am I going to say?"
Yeah.
And, there's times that, I almost said his full name. I don't know. I think it'd be okay. But anyway, Zowie would do the same thing to me. And I'm like, "Bro." And they knew that I didn't care, but I would like push back a little bit. And, yeah, it was awesome. Those guys are freaking absolute studs. But, he was older going through BUDS.
Okay.
And so was Zowie.
Right
as
on.
well, same thing. And also AJ, who was not in this movie, but AJ James, he was in Act of Valor. He was a black guy with the gold tooth in
Nice.
Act of Valor. He went through BUDS in his early 30s, bro.
Oh, wow.
Good grief.
Yeah. I thought he was 19 or 20 years old. That's how young he looks. AJ's in his 50s now, bro. And he looks like he's in his late 30s.
Josh, how old are you?
I'll be 42 this year.
You know, that's your last year of eligibility to go through Buds. They've bumped it up to 42. Yeah, or it may not be Buds. It's SF. That's one of the things.
I was like, it is not Buds.
No,
there ain't no 42-year-old making it through Buds.
That's what Tony Cowden was saying, is that it got bumped up to 42, so you can still try.
National Guard.
The dream is still alive.
We were just talking about this the other day, and I said, I actually, I'll just read what was in the text, because I hate phrasing things if it's not accurate.
The context.
Because at 39, I have no interest.
The context, we had another Marine recruit class come through to work out at my gym.
Yeah.
And they dropped off a bunch of posters, and there was Marine Raider posters and stuff. So I texted it to him, and I don't remember what I said, but he's got the context.
There's still time.
But
You're running out of time.
I think I said something like, just seeing this poster makes me. I'll
find it. Hold on.
Yeah, I was.
It was all of yesterday. I can't remember what I said.
He said, "Is it too late for me to join? Just the poster gets me hyped." I said, "There's age waivers for everything, my man, if your scores are high enough," which is true. And I said, "I can't tell you how many times I have contemplated going into a reserve unit for the Army and attempting selection." I mean, that my one of my other best friends, Dane. You know Dane.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know Dane as well.
We know. I know of Dane.
Oh, yes. You know of Dane. You've never met him.
I've
yet.
never met Dane. Yeah.
Okay.
I've not had the pleasure.
All right. Well, he went into the Army and airborne, and that was one of the things, like, him and I talked about. Like, there was a time, like, I wanted to make that happen. I wasn't able to. He did it. He went. He trained. He went to the Army, and there was, like, times where I was, like, looking into different reserve units, and because I know you go into a reserve unit and then you can go through selection, and if you make it, cool. If not, then you're still in that reserve unit. And I'm like, man, there's so many times I've talked to Jocko about that. I'm like, man.
Yeah. Kirsten and I were talking about it because we're house shopping, and we've talked with the wonderful and talented Andrew Paul, and he's like, man, there's a lot of stuff if you did a VA loan, and Kirsten's like, it's 2 weeks a month, 2 weeks a year, 1 week in a month. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But I'm 40. And she's like, yeah, and you're fat. I was like, oh
man, that's a lie.
I know, yeah. That was
not accurate.
That was something she said and then left, because it was her way of being like, oh yeah, you don't think you can. So it was good.
Oh, bro, you'd be good.
Little push. I don't know if I will. I do want to give a shout out to my boy Diego Gonzalez, who we talked about. You and Brent gave him some advice. Goes to our church, finished up Navy boot camp.
Nice.
Yeah, they were the Hall of Fame group, or Hall of Fame division.
Nice.
Got a bunch of cool flags and stuff that he sent me pictures of that looks super rad. He's was it Shore Patrol?
Okay.
So got in. That's the job that was available, and we had a couple of conversations. And at first he was like, I'm thinking like 4 years, and now after this we talked a little bit, and he's like, bro, I think I found my calling. I think the Navy's going to be it for me. So congrats, Diego, and
congrats, man,
for all those guys who are just killing it out there, for all the troopers.
All right. I think, man, we could continue talking about this movie for hours. Phenomenal movie, Warfare by Ray Mendoza. Go see it. Bring some friends. Tell some people about it. I would love I would love for people to experience what we experience, so you have a better understanding of just these things, and also just for Ray to just be honored properly for his hard work that him and Zowie and the rest of those guys did on that movie. But Josh, any final questions about anything in life?
No.
Liberty in the pursuit of happiness.
I'm with you, man. Go see the movie. Go see it in theaters if you can. Support it. It was awesome. It was intense. It was deep. It was emotional. But you can tell all the work that these guys put in it, and I think it's a way to do honor for these guys. I don't know Ray, but I know JP does, and even if you don't know any of these guys, it's a great way to honor them and the work that they put into it. So I highly suggest going to see it. Other than that, I don't have anything to add. Well, I will say I won't say any movie names, but I like to read historical books and typically military history, stuff like that, all the way back, even Revolution. And I think Hollywood can get it wrong so often. And there's been great movies I've seen, and then I read the actual book from people that were there, and it's vastly different. And this is written and directed by a guy that was there, off the memories of the people that were there. Like, I don't think you're going to get it any more squared away. So
No, you're not. I agree.
Yeah, man. I loved that supporting element remained a supporting element throughout the movie. That the mission was something different. They knew that they were providing Overwatch for somebody. You're told at the beginning of the film that this is a supporting element of something else that's happening, and that you got to see the other side of it. What the guys go through that are there to support, that they're not out of the soup just because the main part of the mission got accomplished. What does they talk about? Hey, the main part of the mission got accomplished. Those guys are returning to base. And as this element is trying to figure that out, you get stuck in the tension and the ambiguity of the what happens next. How do we get out of this? And the sort of I want to say just you really get lost in not just the film, but in the sense of like, how do we get back? Like that's so much of what like captivated me about this film, is that the mission is accomplished. These guys were there as support, and we don't think about that. That those elements are out there and they're still stuck, and there's this feeling of why aren't they just able to go home? That hung with me throughout the entire course of the film. And as you get towards the end of it, you realize that there is more to all of these things than what we consider in the civilian populace, and that the risks that are taken, and the stories that are now being told of just incredible acts of heroism so often have nothing to do with the guy that makes it in or out, or the guy that takes the last shot or whatever. It is all of the brave men and women who are out there making sure that the folks that executed the key parts of the mission are taken care of and get in and out, and seeing it from that aspect and from that standpoint, that they didn't try to make these guys out to be anything more than what that group was actually there to do, hit home in a completely different way for me, where I was like, you know what? That has got to be the hardest job in the world, because unless Ray told this story, nobody would know who these guys are.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
But every one of those guys put their life on the line to make sure that the mission was accomplished, and they want no glory for any of it.
Yeah.
And man, I left that theater feeling incredibly humble and grateful for what you and the men that you served with have afforded us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal movie. Ray, I'm proud of you. I love you, bud. Zowie, I'm proud of you. Love you, man. And all the other guys that were a part of that. And you did a phenomenal job honoring the Brotherhood and Elliot, and everything your task unit did, everything those soldiers did, everything those Marines did. It was phenomenal. So,
well, as you get ready to make your final thoughts and statements on this, let's talk about ways these folks can support the podcast. First off, thank you so much for listening. Josh, thanks for being here today, dude.
Thanks for having me.
It was a fun little experience and episode that we get to do. Very cool to get to sit next to a guy that's been through it in in the theater and get to watch it all.
Absolutely.
All take place. Thank you guys for watching, for listening to the podcast, for sharing it. It does so much for us whenever you share our episodes, liking, subscribing, ringing the bell so that you get notifications when some of those YouTube shorts come out, or those little exclusive Q&As that we do. We got some of those coming out soon. If you want to follow us on social media, I'm at Lucas Pinker. Josh is at Josh Strasburger, and JP is at JP Dinnell. Links for all of that stuff is in the show notes. Make sure that you're following Echelon Front. You heard us talk a lot today about Task Unit Bruiser, about Jocko, and about some of the instructors at Echelon Front. Then if you want Echelon Front to work with your company, go check them out at echelonfront.com. If you want to be part of the Monday meetings, that online leadership academy, those calls have been just completely invaluable to me. The community and stuff that's there, they've got online courses, all kinds of stuff. Send JP a direct message and he can facilitate hooking somebody up with you and your company so that you can get the best leadership training that's out there. And I say that unsolicited because it really has. It's changed the way that we lead at our church. And a lot of the churches around ours have gotten onto the extreme ownership bandwagon. Check out the Extreme Ownership Academy, and just get one of the instructors to talk with you, do a little consult, figure out what your company needs and see how they might be able to meet those needs in a number of different ways. Also, on Tuesdays, the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast comes out, a ministry that all three of us are a part of. Our guys just got back from Idaho, where a bunch of cool stuff happened up there.
Dude, they had salvations and baptisms. Come on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Danny Ziem made a special guest appearance there at 208 Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. So
also, I know I've talked about him, but he hasn't been on the podcast. But my buddy Sean Hess was there as well. And Jackson from Jocko Fuel hooked them up.
Our boy Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy, and Victor was there as well. And it was just an incredible event. You know, Brent flew out there, Robin and her husband Dave were out there as well.
You might see
Aaron
Dave's
Archer
creation coming up on one of our YouTube shorts pretty soon.
Yes,
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Not gonna lie.
Terrible.
It's awesome.
It's terrible. Yeah, Robin and Dave got out there. It was such a cool event, and getting to see the pictures and stuff of that was pretty rad. So we regularly do seminars just like this with Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu. We bring out some world-class Jiu-Jitsu instruction and then have somebody share their testimony and open it up for open mat and some incredible training with some of the best in the world. You can check out Little Cattle Co., littlecattle.co.
Yeah, dog. Get that beef.
That's what I'm talking about. It's a company that JP is partnering with our good friend Stephen Little. They are offering all kinds of beef tallow products. You got body butter, you got tallow cream, you got lip balm, the invigorating coffee body scrub, which I just love using the word invigorating. To be honest, it's really good. I've heard, Josh, you might try this, that coffee grounds are good for waking up the dormant hair follicles.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I might have to try some of that. I'm not for sure that it can happen, but I might have to try some of that.
What's it going to hurt?
Nothing.
Smell like coffee.
Yeah, which my wife would love. Maybe she'll start talking to me again if I do that. You can also check out the beef sticks, which are absolutely incredible. They get the regular and the jalapeno flavor. If you want to be a wholesaler for the beef sticks to get them into your gym, or at your maybe you got a booth at the farmers market and you want to offer some beef sticks. You got a coffee shop, whatever. Check them out. You can email amanda@littlecattle.co. The other two guys here at the table with me own a printing company called On the Path Printing. We got some brand new Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu shirts from On the Path.
Yeah.
You guys are up and running, doing some cool stuff. Some JP Dinnell merch is about to come out of On the Path. We might see an appearance by Tactical Timmy or Detective Dan one of these days. Coming up there. Definitely the NCC designs are at the top of the list, and shout out to all you guys who have continued to support us. Bruiser Arms. If you're on Instagram, you got to check them out at Bruiser Arms. They do custom gear packages. It's Leif, it's Jocko, it's JP. They do custom gear packages and training. We mentioned half-face blades earlier. They have a custom knife that they've done for Bruiser Arms, which is so cool. It's got part of one of the TU Bruiser logos on it, which is so sick.
It's very sick.
And I coveteth this knife, so I'm gonna have to repent of that later. And a big shout out to the guys over at Origin and Jocko Fuel, bringing manufacturing back to America. You know, I sent you a message earlier, and I might, not to get too political, but I think we need to holler at Pete and get him to do a coupon code that says like tariff free, since everything is made in America. Cotton grown in West Texas, loomed up on the West Coast.
East Coast.
Or the East Coast, yeah, which is the opposite of the West Coast. It's the other direction, on the right-hand side.
On the right hand.
Yeah. But not only do they have the custom rash guards, the custom gis, the weaves that they came up with are things that Pete designed himself.
Yeah.
That you can't get it anywhere else. Particularly for the gis, they're so rad. As well as an all-American made hunting line. They've got some new boots that are about to drop. So if you want those new Chelsea boots,
boots,
yeah, get some new boots goofing.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
Yes.
this
There's a limited number of pairs being made
for initial kickoff. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I've been talking with Origin, I want to help them with is just some of their B2B sales.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a fire department that they're working with
Really?
to do a run of the Chelsea boots to be their station uniform boot.
Ooh. What fire department do I need to try to get on at so I get a pair of these boots?
How cool is that?
That
but
is pretty
so
awesome.
that's what they're doing, you know. Also, there's a movie coming out, and we're trying to help facilitate. My buddy Ben that works at Echelon Front, Ben Duff, he's an awesome human. He's got so many connections. It's crazy.
Right.
But one of his buddies was in the original Super Troopers.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he's also been in Super Troopers 2. And Super Trooper 3 is coming out. Well, this guy wears his Origin stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's all he wears. And so we're working on getting Origin to be some of the clothes that they wear in Super Troopers 3.
That would be sick.
Because I know Amanda Roberts did that for the Terminal List.
Oh, right
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also in Way of the Warrior Kid movie that's coming out. And
Can't
so,
imagine. Yeah. Chris
it's really-
Pratt's going to be rocking his Origin gear as Uncle Jake.
Yep. And the only reason why I say that is it's incredible to see what Origin has done. I mean, we talk about Origin, we talk about Jocko Fuel. It's obviously important to buy American made, to support American made, to have loyalty to the brand. I know I was, unfortunately, Michael Chandler lost his fight this weekend. Incredible warrior. I mean, his fight was gnarly, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
And Patty's the real deal, dude.
Yeah. I mean, Patty is.
That's no.
Yeah. And
you lost to one of the best in the world, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, Michael Chandler is an incredible human, and fortunate to be able to, like, call him a friend. And we were talking last week and getting him connected with Origin and just, you know, just for some of the stuff that they're doing. He wants to be a part of that. And it's just so cool and inspiring what Peter Roberts and Amanda have done with Origin and Jocko Fuel, and obviously Jocko and Dedeco and Brian and all the guys that have been included with it. Our buddies,
the whole team up there, yeah.
John Milan and Dennis and all those guys. Like, their strategic vision is unreal. Like, Pete thinks in 10 to 20 year increments and blocks. Like, that's how he thinks, and what he's doing is unreal. And getting to I got to talk to him last week. I spent a little bit of time with him and Amanda and some of the people at Origin. And it's just so inspiring to be around somebody like Pete and Amanda for what they do, what they've done, what they're going to do, how they think, and the way they attack things is just unreal. I know anytime I have conversations with them, I'm sending you text messages for you guys of like little quotes that Pete might say or ideas and thoughts of, just because I think it's things that as you take these things on and you think about those things, and it just changes the way that you look at things, and it enhances your perspective on life.
And you can see how it's come into fruition over the last 8-9 years.
It's been over a decade, yeah. But but the last 8 to 9
few
years of
yeah.
growth is.
Well, and I know
100,000
all
pairs of jeans last year.
I know all sin, like when the memories pop up of like, old Jocko Fuel stuff or old Origin stuff, I'll screenshot it and send it, and it's like, wow.
The Origin Labs stuff. That's pretty funny for me because like I didn't know that whole story. Listening back to the old Jocko episodes, they're talking about like around 100. They're like, oh, an Origin Labs, and I was like, okay,
Yeah,
right
baby.
on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw this or not. The Origin posted something from their COO, Amanda Roberts. She's wearing a prototype pair of their ladies' jeans.
Yep. They're unreal.
I showed Kirsten because that's been the big beef that we've got at our house with Origin is that they don't make anything.
My wife has also
for ladies,
brought
right?
things up.
Like Kirsten steals my joggers all the time. She's like, they're super comfortable, and she's tried on my Deltas, and she's like, yep, if only I were near over the hill and fat, then I could wear your pants, But instead, seeing the ladies' jeans, that's going to be a complete game changer because that is an entirely new market that is completely untapped by anybody that's doing stuff all American made. Yeah. And then obviously the guys over at Jocko Fuel, best products in the game. We've got so many people that are in my circle that have started on it. We got one guy, huge success story. He has been in recovery for a few years, decided this year was going to be the year that he got into shape, stopped drinking energy drinks except for the Jocko Fuel energy drinks on those because they're clean energy. Started taking a little bit of Jocko creatine on the greens. He's down 35 pounds just in a couple of months, totally on the path, going to the gym that's in their subdivision every day, doing a little bit on the row machine, and then he's been shooting me messages, and he's like, all right, I'm up to episode 77 of the JP Dinnell Podcast. I'm digging it so far, but you guys are going to have to start doing 2 a week because I'm on the rower now. So that's awesome. So shout out to those guys, and go check out JockoFuel.com or OriginUSA.com to get the gear there. It is it's the coolest. It's the best stuff that's out there, man.
Yeah. So I'll go back to the Bible verse I talked about at the beginning, Proverbs 1:33. But all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear of harm. That's on the back of the shirt I'm wearing. On the front, it says be unbothered. I was trying to look down and talk. I need to actually talk in the microphone. I apologize. But about just that understanding, like, hey, things in life are going to happen to you. And the more we can rely on what we have in regards to our faith and our relationship with the Lord, the relationship with our spouses, with our family members, with our friends, business partners, the people around us that matter, like, we need to be intentional about building those relationships, strengthening who we are as humans, and just be unbothered by the little things. Don't get wrapped up in the small details of life. Now, sometimes those small things are important, but most of the time the small things are called small things for a reason. And we need to step back. We need to step back and detach from our emotions, because the reason why we make small things big things is because we're not detached. We're emotional, we're sucked in, and we're typically going to make bad decisions. So the more we can detach from our emotions and step back, process information to make good decisions and be logical, the better we are going to be able to lead. We can lead ourselves, we can lead our families, we can lead our communities, and that's what's important. So with that, I hope this episode has been a reminder to go do the work that is needed, to put in the effort, to build your legacy, and to never settle. This has been the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 82.